In its long history of use, it has aided in healing virtually every known illness and injury, including some serious problems like multiple sclerosis, heart disease, and cancer, as well as skin problems, cuts, bruises, broken bones, headaches, cold, flu, sore throat, sunburn, fatigue, insomnia, impotence, poor memory, lack of confidence, etc., etc. Like, that's a direct quote.
It'll cure what ails you. Come on down. What's up, guys? It's your friend Jordan. With me, as always, is my boy Jared. How you doing, Jared?
I am doing well today, Jordan. Thank you for asking.
So, Jared, I don't know how you're doing in your life. You feeling good? You feeling sick? You got COVID or anything?
I don't have COVID, but lately I've had I just feel kind of, I'm like something's blocked in me.
So, what if I told you that I knew of a revolutionary healing technique developed by a Buddhist monk in rural Japan, and that this technique, it would allow anybody, even with a tiny amount of training, to heal their friends and family, and you can even do it on yourself, and you don't need any equipment. You can do it anywhere at any time. You don't even need to be in the same room as the person you're healing.
Will it take care of my blockage?
Yeah, it'll take care of literally anything that's wrong with you. And since I know you're a skeptic who likes evidence, this technique has been studied by peer-reviewed journals, and it's practiced in some of the best hospitals and universities in the world, including the Mayo Clinic and Johns Hopkins. What do you have to say about that, Mr. Skeptic?
Well, I'd say sign me up. Well, if I'm being really skeptical, I'd want to actually have proof that it is in Johns Hopkins in the Mayo Clinic, and I'd want to read your journal articles. But I mean, if those check out, I'm down.
There you go again. So the technique I've been describing is Reiki, R-E-I-K-I, pronounced Reiki. And it's part of what's known as kind of a group of treatments called complementary and alternative medicine, or CAM. And that's a classification of things that includes acupuncture, hypnosis, homeopathy, where the water gets stronger if you dilute it and stuff like that. I don't know how familiar. You've ever had Reiki?
I've never had Reiki myself, but when I was going through my undergrad, I had a classmate who raved up and down about Reiki, but she was into chakras and all this other stuff too, and it sounded very woo-woo at the time, and I didn't pay much attention to it.
My wife used to work at a doctor's office that specialized in pain management, and one of their therapists was a Reiki. They also did acupuncture, but she did Reiki as well for some of the patients. Most of the practice was typical pharmaceutical or standard kind of pain management, but they also offered these alternative medicines.
You know what they call alternative medicine that works, Jordan?
I think they call it medicine.
Yeah. What exactly is Reiki, though? I mean, you kind of gave a brief overview of it, but what exactly is going on? How does it work?
So before I dive into that, just wanted to explain real quick why we're talking about this. So this is a pseudoscientific claim, or at least it appears pseudoscientific. But unlike a lot of things that we examine, this is actually used in the real medical world in the context of real doctors. So you go to get your treatment at the hospital for your cancer, and then if you want, they'll send you over to the Reiki board, and you can go get your Reiki if you want.
Yeah. And it's also had been studied by peer-reviewed journals, and they had studies and articles and scientists and all kinds of, it's gotten attention, basically.
Right. So we thought it'd be worth breaking down and seeing, if there's anything to it. I mean, just because it sounds crazy doesn't mean it's not true. So we have to look at the evidence.
So we have a claim.
Right. As to what it is, though, Reiki is a type of energy healing. And it's based on the idea that there's a universal, unseen life force energy that flows in and through all things. Presumably, you need some midi-chlorians to talk to it or something. It sounds very much like the Force to me. They say the word Reiki means spiritual energy, because Rei for spirit and Ki for universal energy in Japanese. That's what I read everywhere. But I actually have a friend of mine who speaks fluent Japanese. He taught English in Japan for a summer. And so I asked him like what it actually means, and he said, my friend Evan, he said, Rei is like an actual spirit, not spiritual. Qi is like the Chinese qi in the sense that qi can mean spirit, but like how are your spirits? Like how are you feeling? It's your general attitude. If I had to translate Reiki, I'd probably say spirit's mood, not spiritual energy.
So kind of like, how's your soul doing?
Right. So there's your class on Japanese for the day.
Arigato.
Right. Nice. So when you get a treatment of Reiki, it looks a little bit like you're going to get a massage, though they are emphatic that you can do Reiki anytime, any place. What they typically do is they'll take you to like a calm room, maybe dim the lights, some put on some music if you like.
Turn off the lights and light a candle.
Though they will not tell you to take off your clothes. And like they are very emphatic. I did not see a single place that talked about taking off your clothes. They're all like underlining fully clothed. I don't know if it's been a problem, but you lay down fully clothed in this calm environment. And then what they do is they kind of put their hands over you. It can involve very light touching or no touching. And what they say is happening is they're channeling this spiritual universal life energy into you.
So the Reiki practitioner, the person who's doing the Reiki, isn't actually have some powers. They're just kind of like opening up a flow of energy into you.
Right. They're like a conduit for this life energy, but it's not coming from them. And which is part of why I guess anybody can do it, because anybody can channel it. Now, if you're laying there getting blasted with spirit energy, you might expect to feel something, right? If the universal life force is flowing through you. And I was curious what that might feel like. According to the Reiki Alliance, which is like a professional organization for Reiki practitioners, there's many, but that's one of them. The flow may be felt as, quote, any type of sensation, heat, cold, vibration, tingling, unusual heaviness, or sometimes no sensation at all. And
sometimes it doesn't work. Wait, no.
Well, no, it's working.
You just don't know that it's working.
Well, these feelings can correspond to where the person's hands are relative to your body, or maybe not. So basically, if you feel anything anywhere on your body at any time, it's a sign that it's working. But if you also feel nothing, if you feel nothing, that is also a sign it's working. Either way, you're covered.
That is like the most lawyer talk I've ever heard.
Here's my logical syllogism. If you feel something, Reiki's working. If you feel nothing, Reiki's working. Therefore, Reiki's working. It's all logical possibilities.
Wow, I mean, that's great. I mean,
so thanks for coming to the podcast, guys. If you have any questions,
yeah, I mean, so far Reiki's looking really good. I mean, the claim's holding up.
Yeah, that's what it'll look like. It's and the session times vary. Online, they said it's usually like an hour, and what's supposed to happen is that energy is supposed to facilitate your body's recovery from various maladies in some way. Sometimes they'll talk about like blocked chakras or like stored energy, but however they talk about it, the bottom line is it's supposed to make you heal better.
So there's energy in the world. It's just kind of bouncing all over the place. And when you're doing Reiki, you're focusing it like a laser beam onto the bad parts. And it's supposed to like the strings and they're supposed to like realign or something. I don't know.
Well, so to be fair, they are usually pretty open about not fully understanding how it's working. Like that this life force isn't fully understood. We know that they claim to know that they're channeling it, but as to exactly what it means physically, that's unknown.
It sounds a lot like the force. It really does.
It does. But there is one big difference. Reiki it's very easy, very simple. Like unlike like your Jedi and it takes your entire life. So I don't gotta
go to Tatooine and find some old hermit somewhere and learn from him.
Right. Or get rejected by the Jedi Council and then turn into the dark side. Like you'd be like, I don't know what an evil Reiki would be.
Ooh.
Like if you're evil Jedi, you're Sith, right? Well, not necessarily. Easy Star Wars fans. But in most Star Wars properties, if you're bad, you're Sith.
Yeah.
I don't know what a bad
People are banging on their keyboard right now. Just
what a rogue Reiki would be. But anyway, because like you said, you're not using your own energy, you're like channeling it, then anybody can do it. In fact,
so if anybody can do it, could I learn how to do it?
you could learn, well, yes and no. So the way that the training goes, there are 3 degrees, like levels basically.
You're like
in
black
Reiki.
belt, purple belt, brown belt, something like that.
Kind of, except there's only 3.
Oh.
But you don't learn how to do Reiki. And I'm getting most of this is from the Reiki Alliance, and some of the information is from the Institute for Reiki Training, if you want to see what they have to say.
These are places that actually certify people as Reiki practitioners.
Right. There's no like central organization. It's very loose knit, but these are some of the places that seem reputable as far as Reiki goes. So you don't learn how to do Reiki. The ability to do it is transferred directly to you from a Reiki master. And you have to get it direct from the master. So you can't learn it from reading a book. And in fact, some of the places I saw discourage students from even taking notes, because it has nothing to do with your book learning. It's all about direct transfer from the master. And as you go up in degrees, there are initiations or attunements, they're also called, where they have some kind of mystical ceremony that lets you open yourself to the Reiki and channel it. They don't say what those attunements consist of, but something.
Well, how'd the first person learn it then?
We'll get to that in a minute.
Okay, cool.
But so the first degree teaches you how to do the force channeling thing we were talking about with like the hands and and that you only need 12 hours of training to do.
Ooh, that's not bad.
Yeah, it was like 3 4-hour or maybe 3-hour, one combination. And included in that, you'll get all the various initiations. Then boom, you can go do Reiki on anybody you want, including yourself. After that, you can go on, but they say it's not like you need to, like a 2nd degree Reiki is better than a 1st degree, because the different degrees correspond to different skills. So if all you want to do is the lay on hands thing, then you never need to do anything else.
Because once you're doing Reiki, you're doing Reiki. It's not like one Reiki works better than another.
You might be more practiced in it and like be more spiritually attuned and aware, but like there's nothing special about you. It's all about the Reiki, and you don't need to be a 2nd degree to do it. So that's the 1st degree. If you want to pick up a new skill, you can go on to do 2nd degree training, and you're supposed to have been a Reiki for about a year, they say. And this one takes a little bit longer. You have to go to a couple weekend seminars. But what it does is it lets you access Reiki mentally by using symbols to achieve distance healing.
Wait, you're mentally using symbols?
Well, you're like drawing symbols, like these mystical symbols. They say
like Doctor Strange.
Yeah, kind of. And they're like a focal point for your Reiki. Like they're saying you could like put the symbol next to the subject, or the subject could have the symbols, or it wasn't completely clear how you're supposed to use symbols. I guess you'd have to go to the seminar to know.
Yeah.
And they also said that they keep the symbols secret. I definitely Googled Reiki symbols and found 3 mystic looking symbols, but I have no way to verify whether those are the symbols.
Those are false symbols that throw you off the track.
Very well could be. They said they didn't want it to be like abused or misused or whatever. I don't know how you'd misuse healing, like healing, whatever. It doesn't matter. But that's
you can't charge somebody for a seminar for secret symbols if they're not secret.
Which is important, because the Reiki Alliance, they've got like 9 elements of Reiki, the things that are very important for them, for their practice. It includes the symbols, the initiations, the oral tradition. Then they say explicitly each of these 9 elements is equally important, and one of them is money.
Oh.
Quote, this element, meaning money, bridges the material and non-material worlds, offering healing for humanity through the power and energy of money. These fees are a part of the form and are the most difficult element for students to reconcile with spiritual practice. This challenges the practitioner to widen the scope of understanding regarding the energy of money and the energetic transmission that occurs when money is exchanged. I know I feel energetic when people give me money.
Yeah. God forbid you want to share your unlimited healing potential for altruistic purposes.
No. You're forgetting element 6.
All right. But there's a 3rd level, right?
The 3rd degree is the master level, so you become a master Reiki, but they say that is just for teaching.
Oh.
So if you don't care to teach,
No,
there's no benefit
no
to being
special skills unlocked at level 3.
Right.
You're just teach other people. Got it.
Right. So if you don't want to teach people, there's no reason to become a master.
Cool. So that's kind of how you become a Reiki. But where did Reiki start then? Like, did it just come out of nowhere? And who was the first person to learn Reiki? Because he obviously didn't have a master to teach him or her, whoever it was.
That's true. So it's hard to know for sure what the actual history is, because it's been kind of well, you get different stories. These details are kind of shared. There's a kind of like a core story that seems to be consistent. So it all started with a guy named, and I'm going to butcher this name, but the best I can do is Mikao Usui. And he was born in 1865, and he was a lifelong Buddhist, and he legit trained at the Buddhist monastery in like martial arts. So he was like straight crouching tiger, hidden dragon as a kid. And so he's the guy who came up with Reiki. And some people just kind of brush over how he came. There's a monument in China that was made by one of his original students, the ones that learned it from Mikao. I don't know if Mikao is his like first name or Usui. I'm going to say Usui. I apologize if it's the wrong one.
He's not around anymore to get upset.
Right. I think like you would actually reverse it if you wanted to analog English first names. I'm probably wrong. I have 50-50 chance.
Somebody else
right.
is typing on their keyboard right now.
Yeah. 50. I definitely should have looked that up. 50-50 chance being right. I'm going with the Usui. So one of his original students commissioned a monument and has kind of like the history of Usui on there. And that monument claims that he went up on Mount Kurama, which is a mountain, I believe, in Japan that's spiritually significant. And he fasted for 21 days. And at the end of that, he had like a spiritual awakening, like a vision, basically. And it indicates he had a powerful light that like entered his mind through the top of his head, and it magically bestowed the knowledge of Reiki on him. So he came off the mountain and knew how to do Reiki, and he tried it on his friends and family, and it worked. And that monument also claims he was like a wonder kid, and basically like childhood genius. But anyway, that's how he got Reiki.
Seems like a pretty cool dude, actually.
So after he got his magic powers, however he got them, he started teaching students in Japan. He stressed 5 precepts. Just for today, do not anger. Just for today, do not worry. Be humble. Be honest in your work, and be compassionate to yourself and others.
Those seem like pretty good principles. I could get along with that.
So originally, Reiki was a system of like spiritual growth. It involved a lot of discipline. Me as a Buddhist monk, so it makes sense.
Yeah.
And the idea was that if you became spiritually more fulfilled and better, then physical and emotional mental healing would just kind of naturally come out of that. In addition to like the Reiki, the way we've been describing, that was what it was. So he did his thing. One person he treated of some kind of life-threatening disease was Chujira Hayashi, who was a retired naval officer. And that guy also became a Reiki master. And then he wanted to bring Reiki to the West. And Usui was all about that because he wanted Reiki to be available for everyone. That was what Usui wanted. So Hayashi is credited with developing the system of Reiki from that spiritual discipline that Usui had to a more practical system where it's more focused on the magic healing hands part. So in addition to that, Hayashi also came up with the innovation of charging money. So that's where the money part comes in.
Oh, I see.
Now, supposedly that was because people take their Reiki more seriously if money's exchanged, and I'm sure there was no other motivation whatsoever.
Yeah.
So then there's one more important figure from Hayashi. So we went to Usui, who was the first guy.
1865.
Right. Well, that's when he was born. So
badass martial arts monk.
Right.
Boom.
To Hayashi, who was a naval officer. He came to the West, and then he taught Takata, who was the first female Reiki, and she kind of organized Reiki, gave it the 3-degree system we have today, and she also had a huge revelation, hey, what if I lied about it? So harnessing the power and energy when someone tells a lie. She lied about Reiki's origins. Basically what she did was she told everyone that Usui was a Christian minister, who is like channeling the power of Jesus, and she basically rewrote the history to be more Christian.
Well, I mean, if you're going to sell it to a Christian audience, I mean...
Yeah, exactly. She was trying to sell it to post-World War II America, so she made it Christian.
And somehow it ended up back not being Christian. Somewhere along the
line. Mostly. If you go some places, sometimes you'll still find the Christian story
variant.
Told.
Yeah.
Right, the Christian variant. But it's mostly back to Eastern spirituality.
So that's a pretty crazy story, like how it came about. I would have thought it would have been a much older practice, just like thinking about like chakras and, all the stuff.
And it definitely shares a lot of language with more like ancient kind of Eastern traditions. It kind of uses the same sort of verbiage, which makes sense because it came from a guy who was steeped in that culture. So that makes sense.
Fairly new practice in human history, actually. So
right.
So I guess that's cool, and it got a lot of steam and stuff, and it's obviously still around today. But we do have to ask the question, though: does it actually work?
Well, I talked to my sister, who has a friend, and that friend's cousin, she...
I know a guy.
Yeah. So, as always, extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence. And this claim is that there's this mystical, undetected energy field that powers all things, and people are channeling that energy to induce healing. That is a big claim, because it would require us to like rewrite physics. That they invoke like quantum weirdness to try to explain it, but
well, the reason they do that is because there's no way to test it. We have no instrumentation that can actually pick up this energy field, or right. Yeah.
But to be fair, it's possible that it's possible that maybe this universal energy field stuff is nonsense, but there's something about what they're doing that isn't that energy field, but is still beneficial. So that's possible too.
Yeah.
But in any case, we need evidence that these claims are true. Right. And like we mentioned before, Reiki has been the topic of some peer-reviewed research, like it's actually been looked into. So we're going to dive into some studies here to examine the evidence and see if it works. Before we do that, I want to really quick go over some language. So if you go into studies, especially if they're dealing with psychology, and most of these are dealing with like anxiety and pain, it can be difficult to compare effects between different studies. So like these guys felt a little bit better and these guys felt a lot a bit better, but which,
right. It depends on if they're using a Likert scale or whatever they're doing.
Right. And how many people you have and like all this stuff. So in order to make it easier to compare study to study and see what the effects are, scientists in that field have come up with several different possible methods. They're kind of grouped together as called effect size. And so I'm getting my information from a paper by a guy named Ferguson, an effect size primer from 2009. And he goes over a bunch of different possible effect sizes. The one we're going to be talking about today is called Cohen's D. Yeah. Get your mind out of the gutter.
Sorry, I totally went there.
So Cohen's D, it quantifies how different a control group is from your experimental group. So when you're doing an experiment, you'll have the people you're doing the experiment on with the Reiki or whatever it is you're testing, and you have control where you don't do anything to. So basically what you do is you take your control group and the difference between that control and the experimental group. There'll be some kind of measurable difference. You divide it by a thing called the standard deviation, which is just like a number of distances from average, and it comes up with a number. And this is measuring how large of an effect your thing had. So if something had a big effect, that means it's very important. If the effect gets small enough, then maybe it's just part of the noise, so it's practically no effect at all.
Got you.
So the numbers attached to that, if you have a Cohen's D of 2.7 or higher, that's considered large by Ferguson, like a big effect. If it's moderate, that's 1.15, so it's kind of in the middle. It has an effect, but it's not a huge effect. And then Ferguson says if it's below 0.41, that's the practical limit, where like under this, it's probably not any real effect.
So the closer you get to zero, the closer you can confidently say that it has no effect, whatever you're testing.
Exactly. So the important things for today, if it's around or below 0.4, you can probably ignore it. And if it's like one or more, there may be something there.
Gotcha.
There are other metrics. I've converted all of them to Cohen's d, so you don't need to worry about it. But if you read the paper, just be aware they might talk about other things. Look at Ferguson and you can figure it out.
So I guess the next question would be, what kind of studies can we be doing here? Because it's not like you can actually test, somebody whether or not it healed their cancer. There's a lot of ethical questions with that, right?
Right. So the way Reiki is actually used at places like the Mayo Clinic, Johns Hopkins, it's used to like make you feel better, help your anxiety, help with your stress, and so that's what they test. And as a kind of first approach, if this is like a magical, mystical healing energy, like it should definitely be able to handle your anxiety and stress, right? Like if your cancer's gone, your stress is going to go way down,
Right.
So if their claim is true, we should see huge effects, I would think. So first thing, let's look at a bunch of non-pharmaceutical treatments for cancer-related fatigue is this one. And basically, so these interventions are things that you're probably more familiar with, stuff like yoga and exercise. So you kind of get a feel for what you should expect, right? And so this paper, Exercise and Other Non-Pharmaceutical Interventions by Hill-Ficker et al. In 2016, Journal of Sports Medicine. So they excluded non-touch interventions like Reiki. So excluding all the mystical stuff, here's other interventions. And relaxation exercises were found to be the best. They had a D of 0.77, so an effect, but not a huge effect, right? Other things that you might be familiar with, aerobic and resistance training was about a 0.67. Yoga was about a 0.68. Tai Chi was right there, the cutoff, 0.45. Okay, so these are the kind of not drugs, just kind of feel good stuff and how they're helping cancer fatigue.
Gotcha. So, that makes sense. So, like, obviously, cancer fatigue is a serious thing. And so, like, we're not expecting a huge return here with just doing some relaxation techniques. And a lot of this seems to be like talking. You're doing therapy or yoga, stretching, and stuff like that. So,
yeah.
And it's below 1, but above 0.41.
Right. So you're getting some effect, not a huge effect, but it is beneficial. So that's what non-mystical stuff looks like. Here's the mystical stuff. First one, massage and Reiki used to reduce stress and anxiety from 2016. And in this study, they tested 3 groups. This was in Sao Paulo, Brazil. They tested 3 groups. Group 1 got massage plus rest. So they got a massage session, then they just like chilled out. Group 2 got a massage, then they went to Reiki after that. And then group 3, they didn't get nothing. Not even a rep down.
So what we're testing here in this study is what we would expect to see if the Reiki works, the group that got massage plus Reiki should have a higher effect than the group that just got a massage.
Right. And you'd expect them both to be higher than somebody who got nothing.
Correct. Okay.
So what we see is kind of that. Both the massage types, so group 1 and group 2, had beneficial effects. So they had reduced stress and anxiety. And the Reiki was better, but it was a very, very small difference. So the D there was 1.18 for Reiki versus 1.14 for massage. So very small difference. And this is just one study with one small group of people.
Okay. So is that within like the statistical, like, variance and stuff, or you think that actually has an effect there?
They didn't make a strong claim, and I didn't see that they had like an error bar on it.
Okay.
But from looking at all the other studies, they varied significantly. So I would, based on what I'm seeing in the other studies, I wouldn't put a huge stop on one study that had a 0.04.
Because
difference.
if you just took out the massage, then the effect is 0.04.
Right.
Yeah.
So it's So basically, massage helps, and it does. If Reiki helps, it doesn't help much more than a massage.
But Reiki doesn't hurt.
It did not hurt, right, from that study. So another one on Reiki, this one was on pain and anxiety. So we did stress and anxiety. This one's on pain by Crane and Cohen in 2014. This was a meta-analysis, which is always good when you're trying to find effects. So what a meta-analysis does is it analyzes the analysis. It takes it piles together a bunch of studies and then analyzes them.
Because you have a bigger pool of data to pull from.
Right. And it kind of tries to find trends and pulls, and you can also get rid of like bad data that way and stuff like that. And so they eventually, after filtering, they got down to 7 studies, which is still not a lot, but some. And for them, the effect sizes ranged quite a bit, but the Reiki hit around between a 0.3 and a 0.8 in Cohen's D for pain and anxiety.
So somewhere between not effective and slightly above.
And somewhat effective. So
Somewhat
somewhere kind of in the same neighborhood as we were seeing stress
relaxation techniques
and yoga. Yeah.
Yeah.
The last one I'm going to look at today, I thought was super cool. It's a really good idea. This one's 2 meta-analyses of non-contact healing studies. So not just Reiki, all kinds of non-contact methods, including Reiki, by Rose, Sonics, and Roxburgh, and they did this in 2015. So what's cool about this one is they had a neat idea. It's hard to test on what they call whole human tests. So basically you're testing a person. And that's hard because people are subject to the placebo effect or the nocebo effect, where like you're expecting something good to happen, so good things happen, or the vice versa, you expect something bad to happen, so bad things happen. Also, particularly with this kind of thing, it's hard to control for. So like, you remember the Templeton Foundation did that intercessory prayer test, right? Yeah. That one, and it's even in the write-up for that study, they said it would be unethical and also impossible for us to stop other people from praying to these people. Like, these are cancer patients, so presumably some of their families are praying. So we can't measure the effect of prayer. We can only measure the effect of like our extra prayer, you know? So the sort of same thing happens here. If you're doing a study on Reiki can be done by distance, right? So you can't, or you don't know what, like, over the course of the study, maybe the guy went and got a Reiki treatment on the side. You don't know. So there's a lot of confounding factors when you're trying to deal with humans. But you
humans
know who's
are complicated, though.
They are. You know who's not going to go down the street to get his Reiki treatment? A yeast sample or your bacteria culture or the mice in your lab.
Nice. So non-humans.
Right. So they had 2 phases to this study. They looked at phase 1 was non-human interventions. And then phase 2, they looked at humans. So really cool idea.
Before we move on, it should be noted that people who practice Reiki claim that it can work on plants and animals as well, right?
We're going to go over some stories later about that, but yes,
okay.
they say that it should work on plants. So this isn't something like it should.
Otherwise, you're testing it on something that's not working. And it does
exactly.
No point. Yeah.
Right. We are testing within the claims being made, which we'll get to in a minute. So before they started, they checked the quality of all the studies, and they used a Sign 50 methodology checklist, which was developed by the Scottish Intercollegiate Guidelines Network. Basically, it's a way of systematically checking studies to see how good they are. They submitted it to like a panel of judges. They removed all the identifying information so they could rank how good the studies were. Turned out, the lower the quality of the study, the higher a measured effect was for non-contact healing. They were strongly correlated. Interesting. Yeah. But all that said, for non-human beings, so like yeast cultures, bacteria, and stuff, the overall Cohen D was 0.534. So above the cutoff, but that Ferguson's is that of 0.4, but a mild effect, but not a great one, But when they only looked at the best studies, the 22 highest, that effect plummeted to 0.232, well below like the practical cutoff. So
that's even more interesting.
Right. This seems that is suggestive that perhaps for a well-designed study, it's finding no effect.
Well, maybe that's just because a human is open to being receiving the energy.
Right. Who knows? Maybe. Yeah. So that was phase 1, non-humans. So phase 2, they did look at humans. Again, the study wasn't just Reiki, but here are some numbers. The Reiki part of the study for stress and anxiety relief had a D of 0.46.
So that's just above 0.41.
Right, just above. Some effect, but not a lot. But now it gets really interesting. See, a lot of the studies they used were written by a guy named Daniel P. Worth. Now, I'm sure I don't need to explain who Daniel P. Worth is to any of our erudite listeners. But in case somehow some of you weren't listening to the paranormal research scene in 2004, I'll go over it, for the fringe group that may not be aware. So Worth was a hugely prolific author of studies on paranormal healing up until 15 years ago. He was the rock star in that thing. Not only was he putting out tons of studies, but almost every time he was finding positive effects. Right. So he's putting up, and these are all peer-reviewed studies in peer-reviewed journals. Some of them were like alternative medicine journals, but some of them were like in legit journals. So that was happening. But as things were going on, there's other researchers who were having trouble replicating his results. And so they were like calling him up, trying to like figure out what his methodology was and like get to the bottom of this, and weren't getting much in the way of answers. Then in 2004, Wirth was arrested and convicted of fraud. And it turns out like this whole story blew up. He teamed up with a guy named Joseph Horvath, who is a known long-term scammer. And the two of them used some false identities over the years, including my favorite one was John Wayne Truelove.
Oh, wow. That's a great name.
It is. And not only is it a great name for a false identity, it was an actual real person. It was an infant who died in 1959, and they stole that.
So he actually stole somebody's identity to just make the name. That's crazy.
Yeah. He stole, like, the identity he stole was named John Wayne Truelove. Like, you can't make this up.
Well, if you're going to steal an identity, I mean, come on.
Seriously, like, that was just begging. Like, he had no medical qualifications, Truelove or Wirth, and it was just a long-term scam. They got millions of dollars. So their Wirth's work has been thoroughly discredited.
So Wirth's work isn't worth nothing.
Right. Depressingly, though, if you look into it, a lot of these papers have not been retracted. So they're still in the publishment as if they were good, solid research. So
gotcha.
That just goes to show that just because it's in a peer-reviewed journal.
So when you're doing these meta-analysis, you might be scraping some of Wirth's work out there into your...
Exactly. Like, peer review is not infallible. It's good, but just because it's in a peer review journal doesn't mean that ipso facto it is true.
Right.
Anyways, back to the meta-analyses. So our folks that did this meta-analysis, they were aware of this, so they decided to do another round of investigation where they took out all of Wirth's work. They took all of this work that had been discredited away, and then that dropped it from like 0.46 to about 0.41. And then they're like, okay, well, now Wirth's work is gone. So now let's look at, without Wirth's work, only the highest quality studies. So the final resulting effect on humans for non-contact healing using only the best studies without con men was 0.232.
That's below the cutoff, though, Jordan.
Well below the cutoff. So all of this research that I looked at, moral of the story, it appears from that evidence that Reiki has little to no actual effect in situations where the placebo is not likely to be a factor. So it has an effect, but that effect is about the same as like yoga and relaxation techniques and other stuff.
So, and that's the reason why places like the Mayo Clinic and Johns Hopkins allow them to do this, I guess?
Yeah, I think, and I'm not in their heads, so I can't say, but it seems...
We can speculate, though.
Yeah, this is speculation, but it seems probable that it's like, well, it has a beneficial effect. I don't care why it has a beneficial effect. If it's just making them feel better and making them feel less anxious and it's not hurting, then fine. Great. They can get Reiki while they're getting treated for cancer, and the patient's better off and everyone's happy.
So what's the problem here then? I mean, like, it does something, or maybe it does nothing, but it's not hurting, right?
Yeah. So when used in a ethical way, like they're doing at Johns Hopkins and Mayo, where it's like, and to be fair, at most of the Reiki organizations that I saw, most places are like, hey, Reiki's good for helping you feel good, but if you're sick, go to a doctor. Like, Reiki's great, but seriously, go to the hospital, That's what most of them were saying.
Yeah. Unfortunately, not all of them are. Well, it makes sense too. If with the modern age and globalization, people realize you put something on the internet, it's going to be scrutinized. But we're still able to find some things out there. I found this one from a website called the Reiki, the International Center for Reiki Training,
which is one of the ones I quoted earlier.
Yes, and they had a quote on there. And it said, in its long history of use, it has aided in healing virtually every known illness and injury, including some serious problems like multiple sclerosis, heart disease, and cancer, as well as skin problems, cuts, bruises, broken bones, headaches, cold, flu, sore throat, sunburn, fatigue, insomnia, impotence, poor memory, lack of confidence, etc., etc. Like, that's a direct quote.
It'll cure what ails you. Come on down.
Yeah. And so the issue is when we have these in practice, statements like this put out there on the internet where somebody reads it and they go, oh, wait, my MS could be cured from this, or my cancer, my heart disease. Like, you start to get into some really thick, muddy waters here.
Right. You could definitely get to a point where it moves from what they're doing at the Mayo Clinic, where it's like, hey, you're getting your treatment and you're also doing Reiki to help you feel better, like you might get a massage. And moving from that to, hey, I got injured. I don't need to go to the doctor because I'm a Reiki.
Right.
You know? And the Reiki Training Center has testimonials, and some of them are way out there.
Yes. Let's go over a few, shall we?
Yeah. So one example, an example of that. So this lady, whose name is Mary, massage therapist, one of her friends got in a car accident and supposedly broke her arm. And she went to the doctor and basically they didn't fix it. She did Reiki over this woman and boom, fracture's gone. Now it's just bruising. The Reiki miraculously did it. Now, again, in the story, she did go to a doctor, but like we're showing it's a very short step from I broke my arm and the Reiki healed it, but I went to a doctor, but the Reiki did it, to I broke my arm, so I'm going to use the Reiki. So there's another one on here where like a lady had these cysts on her ovary and the doctor couldn't fix it, and then they did Reiki and boom, the cysts are gone. It's like magic.
Yeah, I found this one on here where this lady's cat's got cancer and she started doing Reiki on the cats, and now the vet can't believe that the cat's still alive because apparently the woman cured her cat's cancer with Reiki.
So we weren't making it up. Animals are supposed to be affected by Reiki.
Yeah. It's just, so there's story after story of all these, and some of them are really simple. Or
my favorite one, my absolute favorite one is a lady was in hospice with lung cancer, which is very sad.
Yes.
But she was, so hospice, which means she's on her way out. And so they're trying to make her comfortable. And they do the Reiki. And the story is like, she did this Reiki and boom, she was so much better. And then she left the hospital and went home. And Reiki is amazing. She was healed. And like the next sentence is, so yeah, she died 2 months later. It's like, what?
I don't think this means what you think it means.
Right. And there's one where like that they did a crystal, they planted a Reiki crystal next to their pumpkin and the pumpkin got real big, like crazy stuff. So
yeah,
but like you said, when used in an ethical way, it's probably fine. It is an opportunity cost. So if they're using Reiki, they're not using something that like actually might have an effective,
right,
like an effect, you know, and people are wasting money on researching this thing that isn't doing anything.
Researching how to actually cure cancer.
Right. So there is an opportunity cost, but on the whole, it's probably not a big deal if used correctly. But whenever you have a claim that you have access to this mystical power that can heal whatever, it is very easy to use it incorrectly. And then you start getting into problems like they have with intercessory prayer, where parents aren't bringing their kids to the doctor because they're going to pray over them and the kid dies.
Right. Exactly. If you feel like your Reiki is working and you get so much benefit out of it, and next thing you know, you're just foregoing actual medicine. It's just crazy, this kind of stuff, man. Like my take on it is, if you want to use Reiki as a way to relax and calm down, more power to you. Like,
just like I went to a chiropractor a while back, and I went to it knowing that he's not doing any kind of like magical healing tech. Like my back's not going to get any actual better from this, but it feels nice, and he cracks my back and I feel better. And so, okay, like that's what it was for. I know full well that I could get the same thing with a massage, but this guy's a lot cheaper. So,
and you like that sound when it goes.
Exactly. So anyway, that's Reiki. Now you know, and knowing's half the battle.
Go, Joe.
Right. So if you're feeling stressed out and you know a friend who's a Reiki and you'd like to lay down and have them almost but not quite touch you, then rock on. But if you have cancer, go to the freaking hospital. So that's our show, guys. I hope you enjoyed it and got something useful out of it. If you have used Reiki before and you have some testimonials, or maybe you think it's awesome, you can let us know your thoughts on our Facebook page, facebook.com/reason2doubt. If you have any feedback you'd like to give, you can throw it on whatever platform you use to listen to us, whether it's YouTube or a podcast or whatever. We're always love to get feedback and figure out how to improve, or give you a show more like what you're interested in hearing about. And if you have a topic you want us to cover, then let us know and we can probably hit it. So the next one will be a religious episode, and on that one we're going to turn the camera around a little bit and we're going to take some atheists to tasks, covering
damn atheists.
Yeah, those bastards. Covering some misconceptions that atheists have about religion.
Yeah. And if you're saying to yourself, wait a second, this one seemed pretty religious. It was spiritual, not religious.
That's right. It's not the same thing. Anyway, enjoy your Reiki. And until next time, remember, you always have reason to doubt.